For the second time in a row, we are supposed to get a first-round wide receiver back. Is it even going to happen? So we're going to do some breakdowns here a little differently. We're going to go through the teams that have exposure to the virus who are in jeopardy. I don't think this week we should have the same type of risk as we had in week 5. The big game that I think is most in doubt is the Denver Broncos versus the Patriots. The reason being, as of Thursday, there was another positive with a second positive in the wings. That's not a good sign. They weren't able to practice Friday. Saturday, we'll know more. Everybody, cross your fingers. Let's hope. False positive. We obviously are thinking about the players, their families, all of that. That goes without being said. But for fantasy football purposes, we really need this New England-Denver game to happen, and for the players that we need to kind of make that next step. Mainly, Cam Newton, Julian Edelman, those two are our highlights. Cam Newton, off the COVID-19 list, and now practicing with the team. He slates to be a QB1 this week. He also brings up every single player on the New England Patriots. Everyone. Julian Edelman all of a sudden becomes a wide receiver 2. N'Keal Harry, a wide receiver 3. It brings up Harris. It brings up Burkhead. It makes everything more valuable. Everything. This game shouldn't even be competitive with Cam Newton at the helm. Now, for the Broncos, we've got a bit of a... Drew Lock is set to start. He should be okay to resume. But his weapons are so depleted. Noah Fant's a 50-50 flip at best. I mean, you can't count on Noah Fant this week, especially because that Patriots defense is a little bit more stout than you're giving it credit for, even without Stephon Gilmore. KJ Hamler is out. Melvin Gordon is likely going to have a problem. He had an illness on Friday. He also got popped for a DUI earlier in the week. That's a big deal. The league has said that they are not going to tolerate this type of behavior. I would anticipate at least a 2-game suspension on the horizon. So the question is he going to try to preemptively get in front of this thing, or is he going to sit back and say, ooh, I didn't do that, and fight about it and make it last longer? If there is a suspension, that raises the value of Philip Lindsay. We got to see what he looks like, though, from this turf toe injury. We haven't seen him yet in any substantive form since he went down with that injury. So I'm excited to see if this game happens, but if there is a game that you don't want to count on, it's this one. Just plain and simple. It very easily could not happen. And that's why we're covering it first. The next game that has some doubt to it, the Cleveland Browns at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, the reason I say some doubt is because Odell Beckham Jr. went home sick. We don't know what that illness is. We think, based on preliminary tests, that it is not COVID-19. If it is not, then it should be a good game to go. I mean, this is an interesting game. It's a 4-1 team versus a 5-0 or a 4-0 team. I mean, I'll take that. I'll take that matchup every day. But there are some players that we're not going to likely see out here. So the main ones that we're not going to see here are Deontay Johnson for the Steelers. He's out. That back injury, worse than we thought. He's out this week. That sees a rise in Chase Claypool, a reemergence of Juju. maybe a James Washington sighting. But it doesn't decrease the value of Big Ben Roethlisberger at all. He's got to be in your lineup. He's going to be the guy they go to. And the only way the Browns can control this game is to keep the ball out of Big Ben's hands. If they're going to do that, Kareem Hunt is just in for a day. He is going to need to go ham on week 6. The Giants-Washington game doesn't really have that many injuries of note. The only one that is even worth talking about is Darius Slayton. He's got a foot injury. If the Giants can put up the number of points that they did against the Cowboys, I think that Darius Slayton's in for a good game against Washington. I don't think people are arguing the Washington Redskins or the Washington football team is this behemoth that slows people down. No, I think Danny Dimes is going to start seeing that incremental improvements each week. And you're going to start seeing that incremental improvement of value of Darius Slayton this week. For me, Darius Slayton is a wide receiver too. That's pretty high considering how bad this team has been so far this year. Now for the Falcons-Vikings game, we need to be careful. We need to look Sunday morning and say, whoa, all right, were there any additional positives? Because earlier in the week, there was a staffer who had tested positive for the disease. This virus is just prevalent. So that needs to be built into our Sunday morning routine. Let's go check. Let's see what games are actually happening. And let's move forward from there. But there's really no one on the Falcons side that's injured but other than Julio Jones. And Julio Jones is likely scheduled to play. He's off the injury report. Now, whether or not he is a starter in your lineup, that's for you to decide. He wouldn't be in mine. I have him about a wide receiver 3 because he'll have one of these games where he'll come back roaring with vengeance. But he could have another bagel. I don't want to risk it. I understand the Julio Jones owner put so much capital to get him. But you also don't want to just get utterly screwed for having him. I would be looking to trade Julio Jones if you can. If you can't, then you gotta ride it. It's like Michael Thomas. Huge disappointment over to this point, mainly because of injury. Now, for the Vikings, Dalvin Cook's out, making Alexander Mattison a must-start RB1. When he had the touches, he had huge production. This Atlanta Falcons team is not very good. The Vikings team isn't either. But at least the Vikings team has some semblance of an offense. It can move down the field. It can score. We can't say that necessarily about the Atlanta Falcons team. Calvin Ridley and Todd Gurley are the only 2 starters on that team right now, which is crazy to say. That was one of the highest powered offenses in the offseason. We were all just going nuts for them. And then they fired Dan Quinn. So, if you've got your Falcons players, you got to dial them up, but you're not happy about it. Also got some Christian McCaffery news, and it's not great. It's a minimum of 2 more weeks before CMC is off the injured reserve. What that says is if you're the Mike Davis owner, you have essentially stolen like 7 to 8 weeks of production. It's awesome for you. It sucks for the CMC owner. The other thing is, I think there's going to be a little bit more of a split in carries than we had hoped. CMC is going to be a RB1. Don't get me wrong. But it's not like you're feeling, woohoo, this is going to be awesome. I will be looking and considering reasonable offers for a CMC. If you could get a top 5 running back for Christian McCaffrey, I'm considering it. And in the inverse, if you can trade for Christian McCaffrey and you don't need that top 1, 2, you're giving somebody like Chris Carson or something along that lines, I'd do it all day. I mean, you're looking for your fantasy playoff push. And, that's a big thing. He's going to be great in the fantasy playoffs. Now, can you survive to there? A lot of Christian McCaffrey owners can't. So that's why they need to get out of the business, and some of these higher tier teams want to keep in. Because if you're 0-4 or 0-5, or you look like you might be 0-6 after the end of this week, I mean, you gotta look at a change. If you are 2-3 or 3-2, I think you're holding. But if you have, right at that 2 line of wins, that's where I'd consider getting out. For the Lions and Jacksonville game, not exactly a marquee matchup. Desmond Trufant is out, so that defense is a little bit more banged up. None of the skill players are out. On the Jags, though, we have quite a few questionable injuries. We have Josh Allen on the defense. He has a knee injury. DJ Chark has an ankle injury. Tyler Eifert has a neck injury. I mean, Tyler Eifert and DJ Chark, a lot of folks are relying on them. Less so Tyler Eifert. DJ Chark, though, had a monster week 2 weeks ago, and he was on pace to kind of get back into this mold. But he's just taking so many hits that it's shortening that window of viable fantasy production. We really need to see the Jags get him going. And we need to see him become that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1 monster we thought he would be when we drafted him. There are signs of life. It's not like Julio, where things are just absolutely desperate. You have to roll DJ Chark out there. You just do. So throw him in your flex. If it's questionable at game time, make sure you're watching. And if he's out, at least there's something you can slide in there. But if he starts, you're going to have to start him. For the Bengals Colts, the 2 injuries that have any kind of notable kind of impact, Mo Alley-Cox is out, and Autumn Tate is doubtful. With Autumn Tate doubtful, we'll see some increased production for Tyler Boyd. He'll see some